So I've been talking about ledgers because if you have never seen a ledger is literally a book where information is kept. You try to keep information about who holds what at which point in time, and essentially you can think about what a blockchain is. Essentially, it is a ledger of some form. Now, when you think of a ledger at its core, what it is a database. There's a specific feature to a ledger if you want. It's really an append only ledger because what the ledger records is transactions. So it's a particular type of database. But for the sake of the argument at this point, let's consider a blockchain as a database. So, what do we think about here? Well, in the current world of trading or of money transfers, what we have is a situation where you have multiple different databases. Each bank essentially has its own database. The central bank has a database, and all of these databases have to, for a transfer to occur, they have to interact with one another. They have to interact with there's a lot of back and forth of account reconciliation to make sure that if a transfer has been initiated, that the money has been received, and so messages have to be sent back and forth. As I said, it's a cumbersome process. And in particular, as you can see here on the left hand side, if you have to move your stock or your assets, your items of value across a border, when you have governments involved, borders involved, and restrictions for international transfers in place. Now, what would be the most efficient way to organize this? If we had the choice, the easiest, of course, would be if we had a central database. So instead of every bank holding all their information on their own accounts at their own location, if everybody would use a single one, that would be the easiest way. And there is literally no way to argue with this. That a central database that keeps all the information would be most efficient, would be fastest, would be easiest. But of course, that's completely unfathomable, right? Number one is who's gonna organize this? How would we deal with such an entity? How would it be regulated? How could it be kept secure if everything is in one spot? That's frankly a quite scary prospect. So, and then on top of that, even if you could imagine that you can arrange such a database within a single country, and that's already hard to imagine, but imagine you could, right? It still wouldn't work across different countries. If you're a communist country, you can probably just arrange for, the bank would be, because it's communism, it belongs to the people, so it's basically state owned. But you can't have an agreement between different countries. It's never going to happen. Right? It's just impossible. It's unfathomable. So there's also, so as I said, there's hacking controls, who controls it, and how would this work? So then a different thought is a distributed database. So in contrast to everybody holding their own database, it is, I mean, it sounds like a brute force large solution where everybody actually has a copy of all the information. Now think about this. This is actually not a bad idea, right? Because if you need information, you just access the central database. As in, not central, the distributed database, your own ledger, but this ledger is permanently updated across the different parties. Right? So everybody has all the information, all the same information at the same time. It's not a bad idea. Um, but again, you have to ask, if you want to do it that way, you have to ask questions as how does the updating work? Who gets to update this database? Who gets to write to the database and who sets the rules for it? The easiest way to think about this, of course, would be there would be a central authority that does all the updating for you. Right? So in other words, think about it in a single country, you can imagine that there is a central bank and only the central bank has the ability to invoke changes to the database, and everybody has to do as the central bank says. You can put a request for the central bank to make a change, but the central bank is the party that has the final decision about this. Now, what a blockchain is the same. Is essentially it's a distributed database, but the very special feature about it is that anybody can read it, anybody can write to it. The operation of the database works entirely by voluntary participation. It is open to anybody. Anybody can participate both in the reading, writing of it, in an entire organization. And it is regulated by exactly no one. And in particular, there's no borders. Now, with that come immediately a number of issues come up. So clearly it's possible that this is happening among major players like banks. It allows also little guys, like, our Bob here in the corner, he too can participate. Yeah? But also rogues can participate. Uh, you can have countries that are part of this that you may not want to be part of this. There could be criminals in there. For all we know, there could be an alien involved, right? Now, this is, we can argue whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. The fact of the matter is, this is what it is, right? So the way these databases, the way a blockchain technology in its current form is set up is anybody can participate and nobody gets to regulate it. So what is the basic operation of it? It is actually extremely straightforward to think about, unless you go into the details, which you come back later. So if you want to make any transfer of value, what happens is that anything that you own is stored in this database and is associated with an account. So, for instance, at this point here, I give you, this is my particular Ethereum ID, which is associated with, my wallet. I explain in a second what a wallet is. And it is a set of sequence of letters and numbers. So, if you want, go ahead, type this in and search for this. You could just Google it, and it's going to be a little more difficult to figure out. And I'll explain in a second what information you can find. But basically, what it says is that everything that I own as part of a particular database is associated with that address. Now, and the way a transfer then works is essentially if you have Sue here wants to make a transfer to Bob up here, what you would do is you would send a set of instructions to this database. Here, this is the symbol for Ethereum, and gives instructions to make a transfer from her ID, which could be like this, to an ID which would belong to Bob. What the database then would do is they would update the distributed ledger, and that is the end of it. Now, very briefly about these little things here, these wallets. This is a wallet for something called Jaxx, and this is a wallet for something called MetaMask. These are all plugins that I use in my Google Chrome browser, and that basically what they do is they administer the interactions that I have with the blockchain in the following sense. A wallet is associated with an address, and that address, under that address, information is stored in the Ethereum blockchain. Now, while I'm on it, I should give you a quick detour on how you actually get to buy cryptocurrencies. Now, I don't want to spend an awful lot of time on this, but it's not a particularly straightforward process once you try to do it the first time. So essentially the way it works is cryptocurrencies exist. If you want to have them, you have to exchange them for something else. Unless you find someone to give it to you for free, you usually have to give people money. How's that done? Well, there's some entry portals. Standard entry portal is something like Coinbase. In Canada, we have also Quadriga, we have CoinSquare. These are all, if you want, exchanges in the sense of these little money exchange shops that you find at airports, where you can exchange, when you come from one country to another. If you land in Canada, you can exchange your euros or your US dollars for Canadian dollars in cash there. Now, how do you get your money to Coinbase? Well, there's, depending on what options you have, you can use a credit card to make a transfer, or you can use your bank account. You can do in Canada what we call an interact statement. I want to warn you that these are actually expensive transactions. So putting cash from, say, a Visa account or from a bank account into Coinbase involves fee on the order of, depending on which method you use, between 2 and 5%. This is unbelievably high as far as I'm concerned. If you want to make a money transfer, if I would have to pay that much for a money transfer, then I would I would not be doing it. But this is what it is. Okay, so now what do we do then? Well, once you have your money in Coinbase, you can essentially go and buy your cryptocurrency on Coinbase. Once you have bought it on Coinbase, you can send it out from your Coinbase account to an account that you have created elsewhere. For instance, here using my Ether wallet, that's a paper wallet. You can use MetaMask, which is a Chrome plugin, or you can use Jax, which is